Alright guys, BLM here, back with a new video, and in this video we're back talking about Sasuke, and I'm finally getting around to doing a video that I've been wanting to do ever since I started the channel, and here I'll be ranking every Sasuke tournament up to the current point, which is Sasuke 40. And Sasuke is a show that is very personal to me. It is a show that really got me through my middle school years, which were not the kindest to me, though I really ended up becoming obsessed with Sasuke during that time. I remember my dad stumbling upon Ninja Warrior on G4, and I remember watching Shunsuke Nagasaki's run from Sasuke 17, and that really hooking me to the show to where I literally spent years just obsessed with Sasuke, watching Sasuke tournaments over and over again, doing research into competitors, discussing the show online. Like, a lot of my middle school years were spent being obsessed with Sasuke. And for this video here, I did end up going back and rewatching every Sasuke tournament, all 40 of them, which was such a surreal experience, an experience that felt extremely nostalgic, where I haven't rewatched a Sasuke tournament in probably close to 10 years at this point, and to watch all of them in a row, including watching some Japanese broadcasts that I hadn't seen before from the likes of like a Sasuke 1, a Sasuke 5. Again, this was just a really fun experience, and through the process of it, obviously formulated my ranking here. So again, we have 40 tournaments to rank. This will be a ranking based on my personal enjoyment of the tournaments as they were aired on TV. Again, I won't be really assessing this based on things that weren't on the show itself. Again, this is also going to include the tournament's pacing as it was presented. And again, just overall, this ranking is based around the overall television product. But with that, let's get started. At number 40, the worst Sasuke tournament to me is Sasuke 28. And straight up, I still don't think this is an entirely bad tournament. And I think that is what I should say about all these. Like, I like every Sasuke tournament. I don't think there is a truly awful Sasuke tournament. However, 28 is the one that's at the very bottom of the list for me, even though I remember liking this tournament when it originally aired, or at least liking aspects of it. I mean, I do still like the rolling escargot and the spin bridge, while the forcing of the retirement of the All-Stars was just straight up dumb and is still a negative aspect of this tournament. I do think the way that certain All-Stars runs concluded here were pretty satisfying. I mean, Shingo doing the Shingo thing of falling off the side of the spin bridge. We had a great moment for Yamada with him clearing the first warp wall at the moment that he times out. We have Nagano failing the warp wall, the obstacle that took him out in his very first tournament. I feel like all of these would have been solid retirement runs for the respective competitors, though. I mean, obviously they come back again, but really outside that, though, like, this is a pretty bad tournament, and a lot of that comes from just really boring course design. I mean, again, like, rolling escargot and spin bridge are great. Everything else is bad. And we literally get the Godon Toby back for some reason. We have the jump hang kai and double warp walls back to back, which are two really boring obstacles. This is the start of the modern stage 2, which I just really hate, and introduces us to the swap salmon ladder, which is a boring obstacle. We get the introduction to the backstream, and really just overall stage 2 was a snooze fest with a ridiculously high time limit, though even despite that, Rio still times out. And we get stage 3, which is just all about the crazy cliffhanger, which is a very important obstacle nowadays, obviously, considering the many iterations of the crazy cliffhanger, though in its first appearance here, again, it just ends the tournament anticlimactically, with all three that get to it all failing there, which, I mean, is what you would expect from a renewal tournament, but really, I feel like that aspect of the tournament just plays out in the most boring way. Really, outside that, like, this tournament really has a relatively weak field of competitors. I mean, so many of the top names from the previous few tournaments did not end up appearing here. And because that, outside of the shocking fails of Hashimoto and Lien Chi on the spin bridge, and then obviously the All-Stars, most of stage 1 runs were just kind of mundane. And mixing this all in with the fact that we also get this weird party that has a whole bunch of celebrities that are reacting to the tournament, and they clearly don't know anything about Sasuke either, and it's just weird. Again, all this is bad. I really just don't like this tournament on the rewatch, and it's here at number 40. Now, at number 39, we're moving not too far away. The very next tournament, we have SASUKE 29. And SASUKE 29, unlike 28, is one that I've always not liked. Where, I mean, there's obviously one glaring thing here that is a major positive in the fact that this is Morimoto's breakout tournament. Though, even then, when you look in the cracks of that, it's still not even that great, where this really just ends up being a very strange tournament. Now, a lot of that comes from the fact that this was the Asian World Cup qualifier, and through that they end up changing certain rules and made certain production decisions that were just very strange. The most beneficial for Morimoto's sake being the fact that stage 3 was changed to have no time limit at all, even including breaks, which allowed Morimoto to take a ridiculous break before the crazy cliffhanger, allowing him to clear it, which he even admits himself that if had he not been able to do that, he would have failed it. So while again, like him clearing the crazy cliffhanger was this big epic moment, it also was one that was like fully facilitated by a bizarre rule change that was made so they could easily pick a top qualifier here. Also, we have the weird rule in stage 3 where if there were multiple clears, only the fastest would move on to the final. That's really dumb, though obviously doesn't play into effect. But again, that's stage 3. Stages 1 and 2 are also pretty questionable. Stage 1 in particular is just really boring. I mean, they really neutered the course from SASUKE 28, where again, they take out the rolling escargot and spin bridge, the two ninja killers from that tournament, and instead replace them with a really easy version of the log grip and the hedgehog, which is just a fine balance obstacle. And really, this is just an extremely boring stage 1 that ends up giving us 21 stage 1 clears, where really not much of intrigue happens in stage 1. And we do get like some shocking fails from like Takeda failing the hedgehog. We have Nagano injuring himself at the long jump and timing out the wall. We have the first appearance of the Black Tigers, which was just funny and how they all sucked. But again, really we get a mundane stage 1, and stage 2 ends up being ridiculously brutal. And in a way that is a minor positive in the sense that I've always liked having brutal stages. I like having a wide range of fails, as one obviously leads to the shock factor of those fails, but also makes it so that when people eventually clear, it ends up propping up those runs. So I will say SASUKE 29 kind of does the worst version of this in the sense that, one, all these fails are coming from timeouts, which is just not the most interesting way for it to occur. Again, I would much prefer people actually failing obstacles, but also it's done through very blatant production manipulation here, where they constantly change the jets on the backstream, which ended up affecting how people ran. And again, that was just really BS. And again, it's just not that fun to see almost everyone get to the backstream, again the second to last obstacle in stage 1, and almost all struggle there and eventually time out. It's just not interesting TV. So again, for me, I mean, like, there are minor aspects of positivity here. Again, Morimoto's run, you have the brutal stage 2, which by the way, also ridiculous drop in time limit, where they dropped it by 45 seconds, which is insane. But overall, SASUKE 29, again, like, I think it's a mostly mediocre tournament, largely because of its boring and really easy stage 1. It's brutally difficult stage 2, but one that feels manufactured, and then also more wonky rules in stage 3. So because of that, for me, I have SASUKE 29 here at number 39. Now at number 38, we're moving on to a pretty old school tournament. But for me, it's always been by far my least favorite old school tournament, and the fact that it's a largely unnotable one outside of two major storylines, and that is SASUKE 9. And really, SASUKE 9 for me is mostly propped up by the fact that this is Nagano's breakout tournament. This is the tournament where he finally clears stage 1. He becomes the person to get the farthest, making it to the pipe slider jump, and ends up failing there. Like, that is the most notable storyline of this tournament for me. Along with that, you also have Akiyama's shock stage 1 fail and him failing the first obstacle. Again, insane moment there. But outside of that, it's a largely forgettable tournament. I mean, there's not much else of intrigue happening here. It really just feels like more of the same from the last few tournaments, which I think is kind of the issue with these tournaments around this point, is that while SASUKE 5 really shook up the formula, it's like that formula was mostly kept intact. And through that, these tournaments end up feeling kind of samey, especially within the course of stage 1. And I really just don't feel like that much of intrigue happens in stage 1 here. And while we do get a redesigned stage 3, even then, we end it with this anticlimactic Shingo fail on the rumbling dice that ends the entire tournament. So again, like Sasuke 9's always been a tournament that I've never really clicked with, despite it having some major notable storylines. But because of that, for me, it's here at number 38. Now, number 37, we're moving back to a modern tournament, one that is one of the most forgettable tournaments of all time in my eyes, and that is Sasuke 33. And I did very much debate putting this at the very bottom, largely because, again, this is a tournament that feels like almost nothing happens here. Where I think the big storyline here, I guess, is the fact that this is the first appearance of the Fishbone. That's about it. I mean, again, this is a really weird tournament where we get this really anticlimactic ending of 4 of the 5 people to make it to stage 3 all failing the flying bar due to a design error in it, and then we follow that up with Drew being the only one to clear it, only from to fail the ultra crazy cliffhanger, an obstacle he cleared the previous tournament. So again, that's just like such a weird ending to the tournament, feeling like there was no real progress in the course of this tournament. But also before that, we get a stage 2 that has a lot of celebrities make it to stage 2, but all of them failing at relatively easy obstacles like the salmon ladder. But the one reason I didn't put this at the very bottom of the list is because I do feel like stage 1 does have some really shocking fails to it. It's just that they're fails that, again, like don't really stand the test of time. But here we do have both Yuji and Kano failing the rolling hill, which is really insane. We get Ragivaru also failing the rolling hill. We get Kawaguchi failing the double pendulum. We get Darvish's like tragic lumberjack fail. Again, there are some pretty big stage 1 fails here. The problem is that the rest of the tournament is so mundane, and again, it really just feels like this is the most forgettable tournament in the history of Sasuke, and because of that, I have it as low as it is here at number 37. Now, number 36, we're moving on to a tournament that I actually remembered liking. However, on the rewatch, it really just did not click for me. And we're moving one season further. We have Sasuke 34. And this just ends up being more of the same from 33, but I guess slightly better in the fact that we get a bit more notable of results. I mean, here we do get Yusuke clearing the ultra crazy cliffhanger for the first time and getting to the vertical limit, though failing it almost instantly, which in turn convinces Inui that he made stage 3 too difficult, to which it ends up being nerfed following this. But we do get a lot of stage 3 attempts here, a lot of them failing on the cliffhanger, though Yamada gets his first black tiger to the 3rd stage in this tournament. We overall get a good chunk of clears in stage 1, 24 clears, but through that I think leaves stage 1 to be pretty mundane, where outside of Mori failing the steps and Rio failing the double pendulum, there really isn't that much notable happening in terms of fails in stage 1. It really is just a lot of clears. Many of those clears kind of expected at this point, though really the star of the entire tournament in my eyes is Jessie Graff, where this is her first appearance and she becomes the second woman ever to clear stage 1 and proceeds to follow that by being the first ever woman to clear stage 2. And she, again, is such a massive star across this tournament, where for me, she's the main thing that sticks out from this tournament. Though realistically, at the end of the day, again, it's still a mostly mundane tournament. I think it's just slightly more memorable than 33, and that's why it's here at number 36. Now, number 35, we're moving on to another recent tournament. One of the most recent, in fact, and that is Sasuke 39. And this is actually kind of weird because I actually remembered liking this tournament more when I first watched it when it aired not too long ago. But again, my opinion of it dropped significantly on the rewatch here. I really just feel like, as a whole, this is just a very mediocre tournament. I mean, like, obviously, as a renewal tournament, this is just terrible. Very few changes to the course. And really, just overall, I felt like the pacing of this tournament was really strange. Where stage 1 only has the re-inclusion of the double warp wall for some reason, which no one wanted. Stage 2 is exactly the same, really boring. And stage 3, all we got was a modified sidewinder and the swing edge, which is fine, but certainly not the renewal that you really would have expected here. And along with that, I feel like this tournament has really terrible pacing, again, kind of playing into the modern issues with Sasuke and its heavy reliance on celebrities, and in particular those that don't really do well, though here we do get a decent amount of good celebrity runs, though. And we have Saikawa clearing very early on, and we get Rine clearing again. We get Kajihara's first appearance where he clears. Snowman clears. So again, there were a lot of celebrity clears here. Well, so we get like so much time dedicated to Hinakin and Fuwa-chan and like these other celebrities that are just not as interesting to watch. Also, we get stage 1 ending with the competitors getting screwed over by the rain, which leads to Kawaguchi, Yuji, and Morimoto all timing out the warp wall at the very end, along with Darvish failing the rolling hill. Though here we do also get these funny runs from the two all-stars competing in Yamamoto and Yamada, who both really suck here. Both having similar runs in the sense that they both fail very early, but not realize that they fail, so they continue going. Where Yamada fails the quad step, but continues going to rolling hill, only to then fail the end of the rolling hill. And then we have Yamamoto have his foot touch on the silk slider, but then just fail on the fishbone. Again, like, that was pretty funny. So, I mean, there was some intrigue to stage 1, but it kind of was just a bit all over the place. And again, it just kind of sucked to see the rain screw over those last few runs. Stage 2 ends up being easy once again after it being really strong in Sasuke 38, but here we see 9 of the 14 clear here. And stage 3 ends up being really weird, where the new obstacles here and the new Sidewinder and the Swing Edge end up taking out a bulk of the field. And we end up with Tada as the last man standing, and the one that gets the furthest getting to the vertical limit, though is also a person that was completely purple in the tournament up to this point, which was just really strange. And I don't know, this is just a very weird tournament, one that is largely inconsistent, one that does have massive pacing issues, one that is just largely uninteresting for a lot of it. And considering how mediocre of a renewal tournament it is as well, I do have to land it here at 35. Now, number 34, we're moving on back to an earlier season of Sasuke, and really, we're going to be on a stretch here of very early tournaments of Sasuke, ones that definitely do have some appeal to them, though I do feel like in the modern day, these just feel very primitive. That kind of holds them back a bit, especially in comparison to later seasons, and we're starting it off with the most definitive of those. At 34, we have Sasuke 1, and really, I feel like this is more of a novelty here. I feel like this is a tournament that, again, there isn't really much to chew on here. I mean, this was when it was still part of Kinnikubanzuke, and it's extremely short, only an hour. The course is mostly boring. The pace is extremely quick. Something that this tournament does that no other tournament does, surprisingly, is actually show all 100 contestants. Now, obviously, most of them through digests, but still really cool to see that. Also, this is the only tournament to not be at Midoriyama, so that's also kind of cool. But again, really outside of that, a mostly lackluster event, though it's just kind of cool to see where things started, see a starting point for certain competitors that become prominent later on. Obviously, we get the first appearance of Yamamoto and the first appearance of Yamada. We get Kane Kasugi here. We get certain other less prominent figures, but people like Ijima and Miura Echi. We get Yukio Ikitani. We obviously get Omori, who gets to the final stage here. But something I do think that really holds us back, even amongst the older Sasuke tournaments, is just how mundane stage 3 is. It's just extremely easy. And while we do see 2 people fail the pole bridge at the very beginning, it's still very easy following that. And also seeing 4 people get to the final stage and all of them not really get that close to the top. It's really just a mundane affair there too. So again, like, I feel like this is a tournament that is cool from a historic standpoint. It's cool to see the first ever tournament. It's cool to see all 100 competitors, but still, the tournament leaves a lot to be desired, and because that's here, number 34. At 33, we're moving on to another old school tournament that I've never particularly loved, and that is Sasuke 7. And to be fair, this is probably one of my least watched old school Sasuke tournaments, but it's also one that I just really don't have much of a connection with. I think it's one that feels kind of mundane by that point, where Sasuke 5 and Sasuke 6 had been 2 very similar tournaments, and to follow that up with Sasuke 7, which is, again, mostly the same course, at least same stage 1, it makes that stage 1 feel just like, again, kind of meh, where again, it's just more of the same people failing the jump hang. I mean, Akiyama fails the jump hang for the second time here. Asaoka fails the jump hang for the 3rd time. We get Omori failing the jump hang for the 2nd time. I mean, a lot of those sort of results are the same, though in general the results here are slightly better than those previous tournaments. We do get 8 stage 1 clears, and we do also get some shocking fails, in the sense that we get Takeda timing out after having fallen off the warp wall, and that's a pretty notable moment. We get Yamana's first ever first stage fail, and him timing out at the top of the rope climb. So again, those are pretty notable moments. That are the main reason why it's as high as it is here, though beyond that, again, we get a boring stage 2, which is redesigned. I mean, this is the first appearance of the chain reaction and the new spider walk, but they're still boring. And while we get Kane failing the new spider walk, it's still like not that interesting result, especially with the time limit being particularly high here. And stage 3 also feels like a pretty mundane affair, to where, while we do see Kenji Takahashi's first stage 3 appearance, I mean, he really gets overshadowed in the edit here, and really it's all about Shingo, who is the last man standing, is the first to clear stage 3 since Sasuke 4, which is a cool moment, though it's all amounted to nothing, as he just instantly fails the final stage due to his injured shoulder, which is a very anticlimactic ending to the season. Again, like, it's just a very weird tournament. Again, there definitely are notable moments here and there. However, it's really just a tournament that never really clicked with me, if it largely just feeling like more of the same, and because that for me, it's here at number 33. Now number 32, again, another very similar style tournament, and that is Sasuke 6. And again, I just said it earlier, like Sasuke 6 is not that dissimilar from Sasuke 7, which is not that dissimilar from Sasuke 5, at least on paper. But Sasuke 6 here, I think, has a leg up on Sasuke 7 in a couple aspects. I think the first thing is the fact that, again, at least it feels a bit more fresh. Again, we're only one tournament away from when these obstacles were new, and through that, seeing people fail the jump hang was not as repetitive as it is in Sasuke 7. And here in particular, this tournament is really brutal with the jump hang, where I believe the jump hang has one of the lowest clear rates of any first stage obstacle ever in this tournament. And through that, we don't get a clear here until number 83, which I believe is the highest number for a first clear ever in Sasuke history. We also get the return of Akiyama after he missing Sasuke 5, and we get the shock of him failing the jump hang here. We get the shock Yamamoto fail on the rolling log, and like, I feel like there are some great moments within stage 1. Stage 2 is a complete snooze, as they really just made it too easy and all 5 clears, so that kind of sucks. But then stage 3 is pretty solid once again, where we finally see people failing the body prop, both the Kusugi brothers and Takeda, and we get this extremely notable Yamada moment where this is the first time he fails the pipe slider descent, but this is the time where he lands on the platform and then falls off the side. This extremely notable fail for me, and again, like, I just feel like this is a tournament that has a lot of notable moments within it. My biggest issue is the fact that, again, it does feel a bit repetitive from Sasuke 5, and because of that, for me, it's here at number 32. Now, number 31, we're moving back to the earliest tournament left on the board, and that is Sasuke 2. And Sasuke 2's always been kind of a weird tournament to me, where obviously it feels like a progression of Sasuke 1, where it is mostly the same course. I believe the only obstacle changes are in stage 3, with the big one being the introduction of the pipe slider. And through that, stages 1 and 2 feel more of the same. Though, I mean, this is the first tournament ever at Midoriyama, so that's something to know. We also get a bit of a stronger field of competitors in this tournament, where we get 34 stage 1 clears, including the first ever appearance of Akiyama. We get Chitanabe's stage 1 clear, obviously being the only woman to clear stage 1 up until Jessie Graff. But really, for me, the thing that stands out about this tournament is the pipe slider. Again, like, the pipe slider was introduced in this tournament, obviously an iconic obstacle, and one that ends up being pretty brutal in stage 3 here, eliminating 7 of the 9 that take it on. Only Omori and Tanaka clear it, the final 2 to even attempt the obstacle. But through that, we also get Shingo's breakout performance, with him getting to stage 3. We get this great fail from Miura, who botches the landing. We get Ebihara derailing the entire thing. Yoshizaki also failing the landing. Again, there's a lot of notable pipe slider fails here that are pretty fun, though at the same time, the rest of the stage is kind of boring. And really, it's all about the pipe slider. And that, and also mixing in with the fact that the tournament ends pretty anticlimactically, of both Tanaka and Omori not being particularly close on the rope climb. Again, like, it is just kind of a mixed bag of a tournament. I do feel like there are a lot of notable moments, and the introduction of the pipe slider is really iconic, along with the fact that this is the first tournament at the Midoriyama set, though at the same time, a lot of it also feels pretty primitive and also feels very samey to Sasuke 1. So I do think it is a better tournament than Sasuke 1, and I do think it's a particularly notable tournament, and that's why it's here at number 31. Now number 30, better version of Sasuke 2, we have Sasuke 3. And I debate putting Sasuke 3 even higher than this, in the fact that Sasuke 3 is obviously a very iconic tournament, particularly for this being the tournament where both Yamamoto and Yamada get to the final stage, really securing their legacies, with Yamada in particular basing his entire Sasuke career around this one performance, and him getting the closest anyone had ever gotten to Kansenseiha at this point, and mixing that with the fact that this also has the first appearance of the rolling log and the rope climb, two pretty iconic obstacles, with the rolling log being this big ninja killer. And those are major aspects of this tournament that really do stand out here. However, this is a tournament that on the rewatch, I really just did not click with as much as I wanted to. And while those things are very strong, the in-betweens are not that great. Again, stage 1 is pretty strong because of the rolling log, but through that, it really narrows down the field to where only 13 people clear stage 1, and through that, we get a not as strong stage 2, where unlike the seasons that predate it, we don't get that many notable stage 2 fails, with almost half the field clearing stage 2. And in stage 3, we get 5 of the 6 there clear it, with the only one not clearing it is Ken Hasegawa, who slips instantly on the pipe slider. So while it is, yes, iconic that 5 people made it to the final stage, it's also because it just was a ridiculously easy stage 3. And again, I feel like this is a tournament that, again, is bookended masterfully. Again, great stage 1, great set of final stage attempts from Yamada and Shingo, but everything in between is just kind of meh to me, and because that, for me, it lands here at number 30. Now number 29, we're moving on to a tournament that, straight up, this and the next tournament that we'll be talking about are both back-to-back here as tournaments that I recognize are not that good. I recognize that these are deeply flawed Sasuke tournaments. However, these are tournaments that I have a lot of nostalgia for, and because that I am landing them higher here. At number 29, we do have Sasuke 20. And Sasuke 20 is a tournament that, again, I recognize is not that good. I think it's a tournament that its stage 1 ends up being a bulk of the tournament and ends up being very poorly paced, so where major portions of it kind of drag, but also ends up being very repetitive of Sasuke 19, where we get very similar results despite it being a nerfed course. And through that, stage 2 is just kind of lame, and stage 3 is just Levi at the end. But again, the fact that Levi is a breakout star of this tournament is something that I think is mostly positive at this point. While Levi's effect on Sasuke is not really that large in the grand scheme of things, the breath of fresh air he brought to Sasuke 20 in particular here was definitely warranted, even though it leads to a very anticlimactic cliffhanger fail. Also, in stage 2, even though it is mostly mundane, it's we do get pretty shocking fails here from Okiyama's breakout performance here, but him only then failing the stick slider, and then we have Nagano's shock fail at the downhill jump. But again, the bulk of this tournament is stage 1, and again, it is a repeat of 19, but with an easier course, but still just as bad results, with the only obstacle being more difficult here being the half pipe attack, which in turn does a lot of damage here. And I will say, I actually do really like the half pipe attack of this tournament. I mean, that is one of the major positives of this tournament for me. That, to me, it was interesting seeing all these people clearing the jumping spider, this obstacle that was such a formidable obstacle back in Sasuke's 18 and 19, however, all leading up to them just failing the half pipe attack immediately afterwards, where so many big names fail here. From Washimi, who is one of the only people to clear the 19 stage, we get Yamamoto failing there, Akiyama failing there, Daisuke Miyazaki's first appearance and him failing there, Wacky's first appearance and him failing there. But also we get other shocking fails along the way as well, with Naoki Kitani making a comeback only from the fail the spider walk portion of the jumping spider. We get Kenji Takahashi failing the flying chute. We get Takamasa Nagasaki and Hiromichi Sato both timing out the Tarzan rope in the exact same way. We get Takada timing out the rope ladder. Again, there are some notable runs here. It's just the overall pacing of the tournament is definitely very slow, and with the very anticlimactic outcome of only Levi making it to stage 3 and him not having much of a chance against the Shin cliffhanger, it definitely does leave this as a pretty mediocre tournament, even though it's one that I have a lot of nostalgia for, with this being the first Sasuke tournament I remember following at the time of airing. But again, it's not really enough to save it too much on this list, so it's here at number 29. And now number 28 28, we're moving on to a tournament that I know is very unpopular within the general community. And I remember even at the time, people were hating this tournament. And again, I agree with all the criticisms. I just still like this tournament anyway. But again, recognize its flaws. But at number 28, we do have SASUKE 26. And again, this is a tournament that is extremely rushed. It is one that had a shortened time slot. And through that, so many people get digested here, to the point where G4 actually ends up having a better representation of the tournament than TBS does, which is pretty ironic. But really, to me, that's like the least of this tournament's issues. To me, the other issues with this tournament are the fact that its results are really just weird, where this ends up being the tournament where ANW 2 ends up concluding within, meaning that the top 10 from ANW 2 got to compete here, and they end up performing better than the other competitors. And through that brings this weird rivalry to where the show really props up this Japan versus foreigner storyline that feels strange and feels very un-Sasuke-like, this show that's supposed to promote people against the course, and for them to really lean into this anti-foreigner concept felt very bizarre. So I will say at the same time, the Americans' involvement in this tournament are probably a major negative for me here, though, where it does leave stages 2 and 3 just strangely put together, where only 4 Japanese competitors end up making it to stage 2, and only Okayama ends up clearing stage 2, to which they end up doing this weird bit of editing where they decide to show Hashimoto's run first, despite Hashimoto running later, which spoils that Hashimoto was going to fail, as why else would they change the run order there? But this ends up being one of the few times in SASUKE history where they blatantly shift around placements to create an artificial storyline, which again, there are tournaments outside of this where they do shift around placements, but I feel like with those, it's more of a pacing thing. Like, this is purely to just make up a storyline about how Okayama is the last Japanese left in stage 2. But even beyond that, again, like stage 3 is really lackluster, where all the Americans fail relatively early, and Lianchi and Okayama end up failing at the same spot in the ultimate cliffhanger. Again, just being an underwhelming outcome to the tournament there. However, the thing that really props up this tournament for me is, one, again, this is pretty much around the peak of my Sasuke fandom, where I adored ANWs 1, 2, and 3, and this is, again, part of ANW 2. But mixing that in with the fact that, again, I love the rolling escargot. It's one of my favorite obstacles in Sasuke history, and to see it do a lot of damage here was a lot of fun. Also mixing that in with the really bad results of this tournament. Again, I've said this before, I am someone that loves when we get a lot of shocking fails. And here again, we get a lot of shocking fails. Where even here, the jumping spire was made more difficult than previous tournaments, which leads to Nagano failing it, and Yamada failing it, and Hiromichi Sato failing it. Again, we get Shingo, Kano, Takahashi failing the rolling escargot. We get Yuji's fail, which Yuji's run in this tournament is probably one of my all-time favorites, where it's such a disaster of him barely getting through the escargot, and then he takes 2 tries to get the jumping spider, and then he misses the landing on the half-pipe attack, only from the rushes landing afterwards, and fails it. Again, it's just a complete mess of a run, but it is so much fun to watch from my eyes. And again, those are things that really propel this tournament up, as outside of that, it is a pretty bad tournament. But I really love those aspects of the tournament enough for me to land it here at number 28. Number 27, moving on to a tournament that, again, I think is definitively better than the last couple we talked about, but still a pretty middling one by the end of it, and that ends up being SASUKE 30. And this is a tournament that I've always been kind of middle of the road on, even before my latest rewatch, but after here, again, I think there's some pros and cons. I think stage 1 is not the greatest in the world. It's definitely, again, a pretty easy course. Again, following up on SASUKE 29, it really leads to a ridiculous number of clears here. Again, 27 stage 1 clears, though there's some notable moments within it, from this being the first appearance of Drew Dreshel, which again was interesting at the time, at least. We get Morimoto getting to number 3000 for some reason, but he clears. We get Nagano's last ever stage 1 clear, along with Takada and Shingo, making this the last time that numerous all-stars clear in a single tournament. But also we get the appearance of Gunpei Shiratori, who ends up failing the jump hang. His last appearance, and this was in itself his first appearance in SASUKE 21. But again, like, it is a mostly like fine stage 1. It's a pretty bad stage 2, to where stage 2 here, while it does do a lot of damage here and only 9 out of the 27 clearing, it does have a lot of very wonky fails, where again, this is really the last straw for the swap salmon ladder, where you get Takeda, Nagano, and Kenji all getting DQ'd on it, though Kenji's in particular obviously being really dumb, considering it just felt like the obstacle malfunctioned. But really, stage 3 is where the tournament really shines in my eyes, where here we get some pretty notable results. I mean, this is Hyoki's first stage 3 appearance, and he gets their crazy cliffhanger. We get Shunsuke, Lee and Chi, and Drew all getting to the cliffhanger and failing there. We get Kano and Asa's third cliffhanger fails in a row here, though we also get some cliffhanger clears, where we get Shinya Kishimoto, who I remember at the time being so happy that he had a breakout run here, made it to the vertical limit. And while he never had a great run again, I still found that to be a good moment. And we do get 2 stage 3 clears here from Kawaguchi's breakout performance, to where he's still a pretty major figure in the modern day. And we get Ryomatachi's second final stage appearance, where he gets relatively close to Kanzen Seiha here. So again, like, I feel like the end of this tournament is pretty strong, and stage 1 has some moments here and there, but as a whole, again, like, a very like kind of fine tournament, which lands it here at number 27. Now, number 26, we're moving on to kind of a series of tournaments all taking place around the same point in Sasuke history, and all being relatively similar to me in terms of their overall placement. But at 26, we're starting off this batch with Sasuke 15. And Sasuke 15 for me is a tournament that I remember liking when I was younger. I mean, this is one of the tournaments that I would watch over and over again, so I do have a love and nostalgia for it. However, on the rewatch, it really did not click as much as I remembered it the first time around, where, I mean, like, stage 1 is not that interesting, despite the fact that we do get this tournament taking place in the middle of the summer, and through that, dehydration becomes a major aspect of this tournament, especially at the warp wall, where we do see a lot of notable warp wall fails due to people's exhaustion by that point. But beyond that, and also a really notable Yamada fail and him falling off the side of the cross bridge, stage 1 ends up being not super notable here. I mean, we do get the Gunpei Shiratori heat stroke storyline, which is pretty notable. But, I mean, like, it doesn't really play that major a factor on the tournament, considering the fact that he clears despite that, and it's only that he has to run a bit later in stage 1. Though stage 2, again, is mostly mundane as well, though we do get the one notable moment of Nagano failing the metal spin, which is made even better in the fact that it was a 100% completion rate up to that point. So the fact that we get this big shock when Nagano fails, again, that's pretty fun. Though it does leave stage 3 to be kind of underwhelming, where by that point you kind of knew that no one really had a shot of the people that were left. And considering we still had the very difficult redesign stage 3, we once again have the tournament end at the double Blanco, with Takeda failing there, which again, just kind of lame to see no real progress from Sasuke 14. So again, like, kind of middling tournament by the end of it, to where there's a couple notable storylines, but not the greatest tournament in the world. So because that's here at number 26. Now, number 25, we're moving on to a tournament that I remember rewatching quite a bit, though on the rewatch it didn't quite click as much as it did when I was younger, but I still do like the tournament as a whole, and that is Sasuke 10. And Sasuke 10 obviously has this big moment that everyone remembers, the Yamada moment at the end of the tournament, where he fails the pipe slider for the second time, and this ends up being his final stage 3 appearance. But he gives the iconic speech saying to him, "There's nothing except for Sasuke," and again, that's a very notable moment. But even beyond that, I do think this is still a solid tournament. Now, again, like, the rest of stage 3 is just fine, and stage 2 is actually kind of boring, where only Arai ends up failing the spider walk, but I actually think stage 1 is actually pretty good. Mostly from the fact that this is a stage 1 that has a really brutal time limit, where they do introduce the Tarzan rope, which through that we see a lot of people get hung up on this, which ends up leading to some timeouts at the very end, or at least some very close calls, where the fastest stage 1 clear here ends up being from Nakata, who still only has a couple seconds left on the clock. And again, we get some notable timeouts from Shingo Yamamoto, really struggling on the Tarzan rope and failing at the very end. We get Gervasio the Fair timing out at the rope climb. We get Akiyama clearing the jump hang only to time out the warped wall. We get a lot of jump hang fails, in this being a tournament where they for some reason decide to make the jump hang more difficult. And through that we get these shocking fails from Takada and Nagano, who both fail there. I mean, to me, this is a notable tournament. Again, I do really like this tournament, mainly because I do have a lot of nostalgia for it. And there are some really interesting aspects of Stage 1. However, I think beyond Stage 1, the tournament definitely slows down to a crawl, with the exception of Yamada's Stage 3 attempt. So because I can't put it much higher here than number 25. Now, number 24, moving on to a tournament that is essentially just Sasuke 10, but better results, and that is Sasuke 11. And again, it's literally the same Stage 1, which leads to the results being very similar, though this ends up being a tournament with a couple notable moments. I think the big one is the fact that this is Nagano's first final stage appearance, though he doesn't get particularly close to winning here, though. The other notable moment is Akiyama finally clearing Stage 1 once again clearing with barely any time on the clock, but that ends up being one of the best runs really in Sasuke history. But really beyond that, it just ends up being a pretty solid tournament, pretty baseline. I mean, the rolling log ends up being really brutal in the first stage, though really no one super notable ends up failing there. But this ends up being a breakout tournament for Gunpei Shiratori, who finally clears Stage 1. Shinji Kobayashi has his first appearance here and dominates Stage 1 as well. We get Kinuku Nakayama's best run, where he almost clears Stage 2, but then times out. We get this big shocking fail for Yamada, where he fails the balance tank. But all around, it's just a solid tournament. It's a solid tournament all around. One that has a couple notable moments. Again, the Akiyama moment being the better one for me. Though this tournament obviously starts this massive spotlight on Nagano as the most likely to eventually win, which makes this a pretty important tournament in its own right. So again, I look at this as a solid tournament, so because that's here number 24. Now number 23, we're moving on to a better version of a tournament we talked about a few spots ago, and that is Sasuke 14, which again is just a better version of Sasuke 15, where again, very similar course, though here we're seeing a lot of these new obstacles for the first time, and through that makes this feel a lot more fresh. Where to me the big thing about Sasuke 14 is that we get this massive redesign for Stage 3 with the inclusion of the jumping bar, climbing bar, and Devil Blanco that ends up radically increasing the difficulty of Stage 3 to where you could tell they were intentionally doing this just to stop Nagano, which they end up being successful at, with him eventually failing the jumping bars. Though really beyond that, I mean, again, it's a mostly just fine tournament. Stage 1 is mostly lackluster. I mean, after the complete redesign from Sasuke 13, it felt like by 14 here, people were already not having that much difficulty with those obstacles, and we get 14 Stage 1 clears, which I believe was the most since Sasuke 4 at this point, and a lot of that had to do with a very lenient time limit. Stage 2 was mostly mundane outside of Gunpei's balance tank fail, and Paul Ham's DQ for not hitting the button, which was just really dumb. But Stage 3, again, is kind of anticlimactic in the sense that the person that makes the first is Shinji Kobayashi, who makes the Devil Blanco, which makes so this is the earliest end to a Sasuke tournament up to this point. Though I should also mention this is also the return of Katsumi Yamada, who missed out on Sasuke 13, and he comes back here just to fail the jump hang, which was kind of funny actually. That he fails this easier version of the jump hang, an obstacle that he had never failed before and cleared much more difficult versions of. But again, it's a fine tournament here. Again, one that I think it's redesigned Stage 3 is a massive highlight. Though outside of that, it's mostly just solid, and because that for me, it's here at 23. Now, number 22, we're moving on to a tournament that I know is held in pretty high regard within the Sasuke community, and I obviously like it to a degree, but I feel like I probably don't like it as much as most other people, and that is Sasuke 18. And Sasuke 18 is a tournament that I've always found kind of weird. Obviously, it's the start of the Shin Sasuke era, and through that is a very important season, undeniably. Obviously, it introduces some really important obstacles for Sasuke history. I mean, the log grip, the jumping spider, the salmon ladder, the Shin cliffhanger. I mean, these are very important obstacles. But I do feel like a lot of what makes Shin Sasuke great is kind of a bit unrefined. However, I still find a lot of this tournament kind of unrefined to a degree, where a lot of the course design here feels very big and bulky to the point where I feel like there's a lot of just kind of boring time of competitors just navigating from one obstacle to the other that I just really don't like the overall course design here. Where it's like the rope gliders are very interesting first obstacle, though obviously it causes injuries, but even beyond that, something I never loved is that, again, it takes forever for them to get from the rope glider to the log grip. We also have the bungee bridge, which is a really lame obstacle after the jumping spider. And the Great Wall is also just kind of a lame modification of the warp wall. And there's definitely some misses to me in this redesigned stage 1. And even then, like, despite this big renewal, the results are actually not that bad for stage 1 here. So, I mean, yeah, the course does a significant amount of damage in the first half of competitors, and we eventually get Takamasa being the first clear, and then we got Yuji Washimi clearing, and then Takada, Nagano, Shunsuke, and Kenji. Again, like, that's 6 clears for a renewal tournament. And we get double the amount of clears that we saw in Sasuke 5. Though obviously we get some shocking fails, like Lee Enchi failing the jumping spider. We get Shingo failing the flying chute. We get Hiromichi Sato's first appearance here and him failing the flying chute. We get Morimoto's first appearance here as a kid failing the jumping spider. We get Shiratori failing the spider walk, and that was a shock. So again, like, there are some big fails here. We get Yamada's, I believe, final time getting to the final obstacle and timing out the rope ladder. So again, there are some pretty big fails here. But again, I just feel like stage 1 feels a bit too bloated for my liking here. And even in stage 2 here, again, like, we do get a completely redesigned course, but and the, like, shoulder walk and the net bridge are kind of lame. And while obviously the salmon ladder is really iconic here, it really ends up being the bulk of stage 2 here, where we see Takamasa, Washimi, and Takada all fail there, and the other 3 clear it and end up clearing the course, leading to stage 3 being a similar issue, with the Shin cliffhanger being the main focus there. And we get Nagano's DQ on it, which is just kind of dumb. And the other 2 just genuinely fail there, with Kenji's fail just being the most normal and being an anticlimactic end to this tournament. I don't know. Like, for me, Sasuke 18's, again, it's a good tournament. I mean, for sure, it's interesting to see the introduction to all these iconic obstacles, but I do feel like as a whole, it feels a bit lacking and it feels a bit bloated to me, and because that, for me, it's here at number 22. Now, number 21, we're moving on to a tournament that I know was not well liked at the time. This is a very controversial tournament when it initially aired. However, I've always personally liked it, and I still like it on the rewatch, and that is Sasuke 32. And Sasuke 32 for me is a tournament that has a great stage 1. I adore stage 1 here. Again, I think the modifications made to stage 1 here were a good enough renewal here. Adding in the quad step to rolling hill combo, that was a fun combination when it started here. We get the introduction of the TIE Fighter and double pendulum. I thought these were really solid additions to stage 1 at the time. And while it was underwhelming to see Yusuke not be able to attend due to work obligations, and this being another tournament where the foreigners ended up taking up a good chunk of the stage 1 clears, I still felt like there were great moments throughout the stage 1. Again, it was a really brutal stage 1, especially with the course getting progressively wet over time, to the point where we get this great run from Drew where he essentially gets screwed over from all the dew and still clears despite that. But also we get these really great fails from Darvish and Kong failing the TIE Fighter, to Yuji failing the double pendulum. We get Ryo being an idiot and timing out immediately after the wall after taking a really long time to do the tackle. And even the next day after these issues reside, we still get Asa failing the TIE Fighter and Kano failing the warp wall. So there were these really big fails in stage 1 here, while also having some pretty big surprises on who cleared. I mean, Jun Sato returns after a while and ends up having a really good run here, and Brent Stephenson ends up being the first clear of the entire tournament. Suzuki ends up having his breakout tournament here, despite him having already competed quite a bit up to this point. Yet for some reason, this is the tournament where he starts to make his comeback. I mean, Shunsuke, after failing stage 1 in Sasuke 31, ends up having a good resurgence here. Now, beyond this, I mean, stage 2 kind of just sucks. I mean, it's the same, just including the conveyor and the time limit's too high and everyone clears. Again, that's really boring. But I thought stage 3 was great with the introduction of the ultra crazy cliffhanger and it seeming like an impossible obstacle, only for Drew to end up clearing it and then fail the vertical limit immediately afterwards. Again, I thought those were all pretty great moments. moments, and mixing that with the fact that we also add in that this is Nagano's retirement tournament. This is a tournament where we get his final normal run, which ends up being a really notable one here. I think ending in a perfect way for Nagano and him timing out at the very end of stage 1 through that, essentially showing that he still has it in him to clear the entire course, but barely missing out on moving on. Again, I think that was a great way to conclude his run. So overall, again, I do like SASUKE 32. I know the issues of the tournament. I know why people don't like it, but I personally have always enjoyed it. Always found it to have a lot of shocking fails, a lot of notable moments, and because that ends up being a pretty notable tournament within this more modern era of Sasuke, and because that's always stood out to me, so that I have it here at number 21. At number 20, we're continuing on with the streak of recent tournaments, moving on to one that I remember not liking when it originally aired. However, I liked it a lot more on the rewatch, and that is SASUKE 37. And this is a tournament that to me is very much in line with SASUKE 32. I think it's another tournament that has a lot of shocking fails. In stage 1, a lot of them being related to the rain. Though I think in direct comparison to SASUKE 32, I think there's also some really notable good runs in SASUKE 37 as well, where SASUKE 32 I think is a tournament that has a lot of shocking fails but doesn't really have any true standout moments. Or I feel like SASUKE 37 elevates beyond that. Where, I mean, yes, we have Kawaguchi and Morimoto failing the warp wall because of the rain, and we get these other more notable fails like Darvish failing the Dragon Glider, and Jamie Ron failing the Rolling Hill, Matachi failing the Fishbone, and those are notable fails there, but beyond that, we still have great runs from the likes of the Black Tigers. We get Yoshiyuki Yamamoto and Isa's first stage 1 clears. We get a really great performance from Yuji Urushihara, which to me probably is one of the main sticking points from this tournament, of this being his best recent tournament, of him clearing the vertical limit and getting to the pipe slider only to get DQ'd from the bar falling off the railing, which was really just a fluke. But again, really notable moment there. Probably one of the most shocking fails ever in all of Sasuke to me. But beyond that, we have the return of Jesse Graff, who gets to the third stage once again. We have Tada finally getting to the final stage, and that's a great moment. And we also get Renee Cassidy, who really comes out of nowhere to just dominate the entire course, getting to the final stage. And well, both Tada and Renee fail the final stage, and we do get a very awkward live event here, with Renee having issues with interpreter and all that sort of stuff. Like, I mean, there is some awkwardness from the live final here, but I felt like this was actually a solid tournament on the rewatch. I feel like it's a tournament that has a good enough chunk of shocking fails in stage 1, but also good notable runs beyond that. And while, yes, there's an element of lameness from the fact that the rain did also stop the rolling log from being used and also end up nerfing the cliffhanger dimension. Again, that does suck, but I still felt like the notable runs here really elevated this tournament to be higher than my initial projection of it, and because that's here number 20. Now number 19, we're moving on to another of the better recent tournaments, and here we're moving on to SASUKE 35, which was a pretty impactful tournament. I mean, this changing the stage 1 formula to where it is what we have today, of the introduction of the Dragon Glider, and through that taking out the lumberjack climb at the end, making the warp wall the final obstacle, and in essence making stage 1 a speed course once again, something I did really enjoy, putting the time limit at only 85 seconds, which made a lot of these runs feel very fresh from this tournament. And we really see the Dragon Glider do a ridiculous amount of damage in this tournament, with no one clearing it until Hyoki at 60 being the first to clear the entire stage. But beyond that, we see like some really notable fails here. Again, Kano fails the Dragon Glider for the first of many times. We see Matachi once again doing his thing of wasting time at the wall and timing out. We get Yamamoto failing the Fishbone. We get ABCZ guy failing a TIE Fighter, which was really out of left field. We have Takada timing out on the Dragon Glider. We have Kenji derailing on the Dragon Glider, which ends up being his retirement run here. We get Yuji timing out the wall. So again, a lot of really notable stage 1 fails, but then mixing that in with the fact that we also get solid results beyond that, where despite only 8 stage 1 clears, In 5 Stage 2 clears, we do get notable Stage 3 results, where we get the introduction of the Planet Bridge, which Hyoki ends up failing. But beyond that, we have Drew and Awaguchi both clearing the Ultra Crazy Cliffhanger and failing the Vertical Limit, only for us to also see Morimoto clear the Vertical Limit and in turn clear the entire stage, which, to be fair, it was a nerf Stage 3, but still we get to see the new final for the first time, the Spider Walk and the Salmon Ladder to Rope Climb. Really elite final stage there, and while Morimoto's not really close to clearing, and overall this was just a solid tournament. Having notable Stage 1 fails, having really notable Stage 3 results, and having a really fun final stage attempt. So again, for me, I thought this was a solid tournament. It's here at number 19. Now, number 18, we're moving back to an old school tournament. One of the last ones on the board, but really we're in a string of tournaments here that are known for having redesigned Stage 1s, and we're starting that off with SASUKE 5. And SASUKE 5 is a weird tournament because I remember actually not liking this one when I was younger. I remember thinking that because everyone just failed on the jump hang and warped wall, and we got only 3 clears, and 2 of those felt really early in Stage 2, and only got Shingo in the final stage. That meant that this was a somewhat boring tournament. However, it really is anything but that. I really feel like instead, this is a tournament that really made Sasuke what it is. I think watching Sasuke's 1 through 4, there's a distinct different tone to Sasuke than what you would get for many of the tournaments that came after that. The 1 through 4 had a pretty simple Stage 1. I mean, just the previous tournament, the Stage 1 record was broken. So to go from that to only 3 clears here, and there being a lot more stakes in each run, I think that definitely helped the show as a whole. I mean, obviously the inclusion of the jump hang and warp wall are 2 of the most iconic obstacles in the history of Sasuke, with the warped wall obviously going even beyond Sasuke to really every other ninja show out there. And even beyond that, we get some pretty great results here. I mean, the 3 people that all clear here are all future All-Stars, where we only have 1 clear up to number 98, which is kind of ridiculous. But again, this ends up being the breakout tournament for Takeda, being the only newbie to clear Stage 1. We get Yamada's great Stage 1 run, where the rolling log derails, but somehow he still survives it. We have him clearing with everyone in the audience not knowing if it was official or not. And again, that was a great moment. And I actually really love Stage 2 here, where I actually kind of wish this was a Stage 2 that they kept, where it is a pretty brutal one that they end up nerfing in the following tournament, with the inclusion of the tackle here, with a shortened spider walk, but still a pretty difficult one, as we see both Takeda and Yamada fail there. But it is a very time-sensitive run here, where, again, it's the exact same time limit as the previous tournaments, but with the inclusion of the tackle. So, again, I thought this was a great stage, too, especially seeing Yamamoto clear it, and barely so. Again, that was great. And then we get to see the redesigned Stage 3 for the first time, seeing obstacles like the body prop, and the cliffhanger Kai, and a modified cliffhanger, and have him failing at the very end of the pipe slider. Again, this is just all around a pretty solid tournament. But really, again, a lot of that comes down to Stage 1. Again, most of the tournament is obviously Stage 1. Though it is interesting to see all these competitors that were doing well in the Sasuke 1 through 4 era all stumbling at these new obstacles. I mean, the likes of Miura and Omori, Asaoka, Naoki Katani. We get so many notable fails from these people who had just done really well in the previous tournament. And we get Travis Allen Schrader's run, which has always been a super notable one to me as well. So yeah, just overall, I like SASUKE 5 at this point, even though it's a tournament that I never liked when I was younger, but I feel like I definitely have an appreciation for it now, and it's here at number 18. Now, number 17, moving on to another tournament, again, largely revolved around its redesigned course, and that is SASUKE 25. Obviously, a tournament after the third ever Kanzen Seiha, and 25 has been a tournament that I've always liked. I remember at the time there was definitely a lot of criticism towards it. However, I've always been a defender on it, and I feel like its reception's kind of turned around more so now, where it is kind of a unique tournament. I mean, it's one that the redesigned Stage 1 here actually only lasts for 1 tournament, as they end up revolving back to the Shin Sasuke format for the following tournament. But here, we get the return of a lot of iconic obstacles. Obstacles like the rolling log, the jump hang, the circle slider, but made way more difficult, which is interesting. We get new obstacles like the dome steps and the bridge jump. We get the log grip weirdly placed right before the warped wall, which I always like this concept of having it later in the course. While I don't actually think it works out in practicality that well, as most people that get that far will probably clear it, I do like this aspect of you being more tired by the time you try it. Again, I always like this redesign stage 1. And we do get some interesting results here. I mean, we obviously get Nagano failing the circle slider, which is a big fail. We get Akiyama failing the warp wall. We get Kishimoto's first appearance, only from the failed dome steps, which is pretty humorous. Tajima fails the circle slider. Itachi finally gets a second chance, only to fail the circle slider. I mean, like, there's some pretty good fails here. Though I will say, as a whole, the results are just kind of fine for stage 1. I mean, like, it ends up being a lot of known quantities that end up clearing. I mean, it essentially is all people who have previously cleared before that make it to stage 2. And stage 2 itself is kind of mixed for me. I mean, you get the slider drop and double salmon ladder, the first appearance of those. Double salmon ladder obviously being a pretty iconic modification to the salmon ladder there. However, the rest of the stage 2 ends up staying the same, which I think is slightly underwhelming. And to be fair, a lot of that is because they kind of blew their load in Sasuke 24 by modifying it then. I do wish they would have waited a tournament, especially because I felt like that redesign was completely unnecessary, but still ends up being a somewhat interesting stage 2. We definitely get some shocking fails from like Levi failing the slider drop. Yuji failing the salmon ladder was a really notable moment for me, especially where he hangs on by the pole and only fails officially when his foot eventually hits the water. We get 2 balance tank fails, which were mind-blowing, and seeing both Shingo and Kano fail the exact same way after having just failed the exact same way in Sasuke 24, and they end up also failing the exact same way in Sasuke 26 too, which is like a weird trend with them. But I ended up having pretty much the exact same runs for 3 tournaments in a row. But again, like them failing the balance tank was really cool. And we get this shock clear from Brian Orozco, who comes out of nowhere to be the only new person to stage 3, where the other 4 end up being 4 of the finalists from the previous tournament. But here we get to stage 3, which I'm kind of mixed on. I mean, like the course itself is great. I mean, I really love this version of stage 3. I just wish that they didn't completely nerf it moving forward. But again, roulette cylinder, the doorknob grasper, floating boards, the ultimate cliffhanger really is a brutal set of obstacles, especially because this is the OG ultimate cliffhanger that had a ridiculous transition from the second to third ledges, which is where we see the tournament end. And I think that part of it can be a bit underwhelming. Now, at the end of the day, it's like, did I want the ultimate cliffhanger to be cleared the first time it appeared? No, because I think that would be underwhelming for an obstacle called the ultimate cliffhanger. But here it really just came off as impossible in the sense that Okayama and Kenji end up failing on the first and second ledges respectively. Only Lee and Chi and Koji even get to attempt the transition to the third ledge. Like, it did come off as a bit overkill, which is why they obviously tone it down for next tournament. But still, it's like from the start of stage 3, it was just like obvious that no one's getting past this. And I feel like that can definitely take out some of the suspense here. But still, overall, a really solid tournament. Again, a great renewal tournament, a very unique renewal tournament. So because that's here, number 17. Number 16, moving on to a tournament that I've always personally liked. This is one that I definitely have a lot of nostalgia for, in the sense that this is one of those that I would watch over and over again when I was a kid, and that is Sasuke 13. And this is, again, another one with a completely redesigned stage 1. Every obstacle in stage 1 here ends up being either modified or brand new after Nagano's almost Kanzenseiha, which does make me question again, like, why'd they do this? I mean, wouldn't they want Nagano to win at this point? And for like, I think the underwhelming aspect of all this is the fact that it fails. I mean, Nagano still gets to the final stage despite this. But I did really actually like this first stage, where I'm shocked that they didn't keep the Prism Seesaw for longer. I thought that was a solid obstacle. Obviously the Sandan rolling log is a nice modification there. The cross bridge I've always liked well enough. I actually really like this version of the jump hang, where even though it's super quick, I mean, you can easily clear this in less than 10 seconds, I do feel like it's still an obstacle that did lead to some shocking fails. I mean, you saw like Manabu Sato and Koji Yamada and some of these other figures that cleared in the previous tournament end up failing there. You also get the first appearance of the crooked wall, which is fine, though we do see Akiyama's fail on it, which is pretty notable. But really, again, it doesn't end up being that major of an overhaul, which I think can be a little bit underwhelming in the sense that, again, it is a completely redesigned stage 1, and one that I do like, but it is one that doesn't end up doing as much damage as you would think, as we do get 10 clears here. Now, stage 2 ends up being pretty decent considering the fact that they didn't change anything, where we do get a lot of timeouts here, and the most notable of which being Shingo's timeout, who times out at the very end, though we then proceed to get 5 clears at the very end of stage 2, which again kind of ruins the pacing a bit. But then we get to stage 3, which is kind of another weird stage 3, where it's one where we do get a new obstacle in the curtain cling, but here we have 5 competitors, and each competitor gets one obstacle further than the previous one, which is weird, where Ikitani fails the body prop, Kobayashi fails the curtain cling, Takeda fails the cliffhanger. Bunpei has a really notable fail to me on the pipe slider where he ends up making the jump but then ends up falling backwards into the water. But then we also have Nagano clearing for the third straight time in an attempt that is actually worse than his previous one. So again, there definitely are pros and cons of this tournament, but I do feel like my nostalgia for it definitely elevate it to where it's here, number 16. Now, number 15, we're moving on to a tournament that I believe is not well regarded among the Sasuke community. And I fully understand why. However, this is another tournament I do have a level of nostalgia for, and I've always personally liked, even though it does have a bit of an underwhelming conclusion, and that is Sasuke 16. And Sasuke 16 to me is a tournament that I remember for its stage 2. I think Sasuke 16 stage 2 is one of my favorite stage 2s in all of Sasuke. Again, it's one where the metal spin became this very dangerous obstacle. And I've personally always loved the metal spin, and I think seeing 7 out of the 15 attempts on it end up failing there was something that was super notable to me. I mean, you get these shocking fails from people that have cleared the metal spin before, mind you, not in this iteration, as this is a modified version of it with a bungee. But we see Shinji Kobayashi fail it, we see Masaki Kobayashi, we saw Paul Hamm fail it in a position where he actually held on for a little bit, only to lose his grip at the last second. We see Akiyama fail it, and by the way, this is also Akiyama's last appearance in stage 2. So again, those are all notable things. Stage 1 ends up being pretty easy, but I mean, there are some interesting obstacles here. And this is the first appearance of the Rokudan Toby, but also we get 2 new obstacles that only appear in this tournament, and to be fair, rightfully so, but I did think they were interesting obstacles visually, and that is the rope reverse and the reverse fly. So again, they don't do much damage, but I did think they were cool to watch. Though realistically, again, this was a very easy stage 1. It ends up having the most clears out of any tournament in this era. But even then, we still get some notable fails here and there. We get Ishimaru making it all the way to a rope climb, only to time out. We get Daisuke Nakata returning after having missed on a few tournaments due to injury and still timing out. We get Yamada timing out at the very end. We get Shingo doing the most Shingo thing ever and failing the jump hang by having his feet hit the water. So again, there are some notable fails there. And moving on to stage 3, I actually think it's a solid stage 3. Now, in a way, it is underwhelming in the sense that, 1, it's a nerf stage 3. I mean, they replaced the rumbling dice with arm rings, which was much easier, and they also decreased the number of jumping bars. But beyond that, we did get some progress here. Again, after 2 tournaments ending at the Devil Blanco, we did finally see 2 people clear it here in Koji Yamada, who fails the pipe slider immediately after getting to the pipe slider, but also we get Bunpei, who makes it the first out of everyone, only failed the pipe slider jump. But I will say that the one thing that I think is underwhelming about this tournament is the fact that this isn't the tournament where Nagano wins. I feel like this was a tournament that very much felt like this was supposed to be the Nagano win, where everything was aligning in this relatively easy stage 1, this nerf stage 3, but instead we end up having the tournament end with Nagano messing up the Devil Blanco and ends up failing there, which again is an underwhelming aspect of the tournament. But overall, again, still a tournament that I have a lot of nostalgia for. I remember just loving the stage 2 here. So again, for me, that's good enough to land it here at 15. Now, number 14, we're continuing on with 2 tournaments here that I do have a lot of nostalgia for. I mean, these 2 tournaments are tournaments that really elevated my Sasuke fandom at the time, both being extremely notable tournaments to me. But at number 14, we're starting that off with Sasuke 22. And Sasuke 22, even taking away my nostalgia from it, is still a solid tournament. I mean, it's one where Yuji and Kano have standout tournaments here, both clearing the Shin cliffhanger, an obstacle that only Nagano and Takeda had cleared previously, essentially establishing them as the new stars. And we have Yuji coming very close to Kanzen Seiha here, being the first person to clear Shin Sasuke's stage 3. So again, that stuff is really notable. You also have a pretty difficult stage 1, where I think outside of Sasuke 19, I mean, this was probably the most difficult stage 1 in this era, particularly with the inclusion of the original slider jump, which again gets nerfed in future tournaments, but here it ends up taking out a wide range of competitors. A lot of notable names. I mean, obviously Nagano fails here. We get Levi failing there. We get Paul Anthony Tarek failing there. We get notable jumping spider fails, which was made more difficult for this tournament, where Takeda and Yamada both failed there. We also get these notable runs from Ishikawa and Daisuke Miyazaki, who both clear all these obstacles only to get time out at the very end. We also get David Campbell's first appearance, where he gets his epic save on the slider jump and ends up timing out at the very end. We get Yamamoto's, again, most Yamamoto fail ever, with him making the landing on the half-pipe attack, only for him to then fail the path to the warped wall, which, again, that's pretty apt. But again, this also ends up being tournaments that mark the return of Lien Chi and Okuyama, who really make a name for themselves, making it the stage 3, and proceed to get better from this point forward. And really, this feels like a shifting point in Shin Sasuke, where I felt like this tournament was the tournament that started off the success from the non-all-star contingent. We get stronger in future tournaments. Now, I will say, I do think stage 2 is kind of a bore here, where it's just a pretty easy stage 2 and everyone clears it, but Hiromichi Sato, where he fails the metal spin, though this ends up starting his trajectory of being the combo breaker, which is funny. But again, just overall, Sasuke 22, again, it's good. I have a lot of nostalgia for it. Again, it's Yuji's breakout tournament. Yuji probably being my favorite Sasuke competitor. But, I mean, it is inconsistent in the sense that, again, stage 2 is not great. And then also, this season's edited really wonkily, where this ends up being the first tournament that really goes out of its way to show runs out of order. Now, again, not in the sense of doing so for suspense like Sasuke 26 does, but it does it more so for pacing issues, because there were a lot of weird number placements in this tournament. I think they kind of recognized that in post, that the pacing would be a bit off if it played out naturally, but I do think it ends up leading to still a weirdly paced tournament. So, again, like, it is just a good tournament, definitely flawed, but it's still here, number 14. Number 13, we're moving on to another tournament. A lot of nostalgia for this one for me, and that is Sasuke 21. And I will say, again, like, I'm pretty sure that the general reception to this tournament is not particularly high. I think it's probably like just slightly better than Sasuke 20, just due to better results. However, for me, this season is definitely elevated above Sasuke 20 in my eyes, in the sense that, one, yes, it has better results. I think that is definitely something that ends up being notable to me, being the best results from a Shin Sasuke tournament up to this point. But also, while the course here is exactly the same as the last few tournaments, again, just with altered difficulty of certain obstacles, I actually really like the Sasuke 21 course, where, again, one of my favorite all-time obstacles is the flying chute, which might be a random choice, but like, I've always just really liked the idea of having to jump off the slide to grab the rope and then rebound to a net. And I know that this is an obstacle that the Sasuke competitors themselves hate, because supposedly it's really painful to grab the rope, and I fully get that, but it's always been an obstacle I just really liked watching, and this is a tournament where we do see a decent amount of flying chute fails. We get Naoki Katani and Haga both flipping over the rope, which, I mean, is probably part of the reason why they got rid of it, in the sense that that's pretty dangerous. But beyond that, we get Ryo Matachi and Urushihara's first appearances and failing the flying chute. Mind you, Urushihara was in the actual broadcast, but again, they fail there. We get Kenjiro Ishimaru shockingly making it all the way to the flying chute, which was a great appearance from him. We get Shingo Yamamoto failing the flying chute once again through him losing momentum and his foot hitting the water. So I've always liked the flying chute there. Even beyond that, again, the Sasuke Trials competitors here end up bringing us some really notable figures that, again, they don't do well here, but they end up being really notable figures moving forward. You get Koji Hashimoto's first appearance. You get Asa's first appearance. You get Jun Sato's first appearance. You get Ryo Matachi, Kawaguchi. Like, all those people first appeared in Sasuke 21 here through Trials. And I feel like that's a notable aspect of this tournament. Also, we get the return of Lien Chi, with him finally clearing stage 1 again after having not done so since Sasuke 17. We get Brian Orozco's run, which I've always really loved. Him barely clearing here, I believe having the slowest stage 1 clear in Shin Sasuke. We get the last good appearance from Shiratori, with him also clearing stage 1 here. We also get this really notable run from Miyazaki, where he ends up barely clearing as well. Plus, also, again, this ends up being a solid tournament for the All-Stars, and the fact that Takada and Nagano both clear, along with Levi, who ends up getting the fastest time. And I remember at the time hating Levi, mainly because, like, he was doing these flips on the walls and before the jumping spider, but now that sort of thing being kind of the norm on things like A and W and stuff, I think I've become more accustomed to it. But then we get a pretty solid stage 2 here. Like, I've always liked the addition of the stoppers at the end of the salmon ladder here that made it harder. Mind you, again, I don't know if that was intentional or not, but it made the bar heavier, and through that, that's what causes Levi's fail here. But we also see Brian Roscoe failing there. We see Daisuke Nakata come back here and be able to clear stage 1 for his final time, only to then have to withdraw due to injury. We get the shock of Bunpei failing downhill jump, but we also get clears here. Again, we get Miyazaki, Takada, and Nagano all clearing, and we get a solid stage 3 where Miyazaki fails the devil steps, but we get both Takada and Nagano clearing the Shin cliffhanger, with Nagano getting to the grinding ring, which, again, the gliding ring that didn't slide. And while it is a kind of BS outcome to the season, again, like, I've always found this to be a super notable tournament. It's one that I always remember rewatching numerous times as a kid, and because of that, and also again, a lot of interesting runs throughout it. For me, I have it here at number 13. Now number 12, and here we're actually moving on to a very recent tournament. One that, I liked at the time. However, I didn't think it would place this high on the ranking until the rewatch here, and that ends up being SASUKE 38. Obviously, the most recent Kansenseiha tournament, and it's a solid one. I do think at the end of the day, there are some aspects of it I don't like. It is the first tournament after COVID, and through that, we get the introduction of the Silk Slider, which is just really lame. And I really don't love Stage 1 here, where Stage 1 as a whole is just weirdly paced, where, again, we get a lot of time spent on celebrities, which is just a normal thing nowadays. But the Akko gang really took forever to get through. We fast forward through people that I actually wanted to see, people like Shunsuke Nagasaki and Kano, who both failed the Dragon Glider again. We get ABCZ and Darvish failing the Dragon Glider, I believe due to a malfunction in the obstacle. But this tournament also has the return of Yamada and Nagano, which, again, we're pretty hype. While, again, didn't expect them to do that well, it's pretty cool to see them back. And I thought Yamada had a pretty solid run getting to the Dragon Glider. Nagano, not as much, but still cool to see him back here. And really outside that, the results are pretty solid. We get 14 Stage 1 clears, mostly from the people you would kind of expect, though we do see certain celebrities get through as well. But really, it's like Stage 1 to me is actually the worst part of this tournament, where I think Stages 2, 3, and obviously the eventual result are all great. Stage 2 was actually good for once, where they actually made Stage 2 decent again, where through the addition of the rolling log, it did make this a really dangerous Stage 2. And through that, we see some shocking fails from like Kitaro failing the rolling log. We see Ryo Matachi have what is probably one of the most pathetic salmon ladder attempts in recent history. And we get a number of timeouts from the likes of Hioki and Araki. We get Yuji timing out. So again, I thought it was a pretty decent Stage 2. And then Stage 3 is solid as well, where we finally get to see the functioning cliffhanger dimension. And we get to see Yoshiki almost clear it on the first ever attempt of it, where he makes the second transition only to fail before reaching the break point. But again, we are in this era, though, where if Morimoto gets to Stage 3, like, obviously he's clearing, and he does easily here, and considering how much training he had been doing for a final stage, not surprising that he gets Kansenseiha here, but it's still a good moment. Again, a near-perfect run on this final stage, which is a great final stage with the Spider Walk, Salmon Ladder, Rope Climb. He also does so in the middle of the rain, which is something that I think is not mentioned as often. So again, I thought that was a pretty good moment. Again, overall, I think Stages 2, 3, and 4, all really good. I think Stage 1 is a bit meandering, which is what kind of brings it down a bit, but it's still here at number 12. Now at number 11, we're moving on to a very conflicting tournament for me. A tournament that I really want to put with the all-time greats. I do think this is a tournament that has the individual moments to be one of the best tournaments of all time, but it's just not there for me, and that is SASUKE 24. And from what I understand, SASUKE 24 is a somewhat divisive season, where it is a tournament that some people call it one of the all-time greats, because there are so many iconic moments within it. However, there's also people that hate its pacing and think it's slow, and I'm in the middle of these two groups. I, again, think it's a good tournament. It's at number 11 on this list, right outside the top 10. I think it has some of the best moments in the history of SASUKE, but its pacing is a drag, and I do feel like those are things that harm it for me. Not just in Stage 1, which I think is what's commonly noted, but really throughout the entire tournament. I'm a person that a lot of people complain about the digests, particularly in later stages. I don't really have that issue. Again, I think there are times where digests do help a tournament. I don't need to say the exact same clear over and over and over again. And to me, that is the way that Stages 2 and 3 should have been approached in this tournament. Mind you, with Stage 3, probably would have been better if it was like a mid-cut or something to that degree. But still, it's like seeing 5 people in a row clear Stage 3, including also Tajima, who makes it all the way to the gliding ring, which, by the way, also fantastic fail there. But seeing 5 people in a row clear Stage 3 is just really lame. Now, I will say the one benefit to it is that it makes the Takeda run even more emotional, where Takeda's fail at the spider flip is one of the greatest moments in the history of SASUKE. It's really this final moment of greatness from Takeda, and this being his final Stage 3 attempt. obviously being the only all-star to never make it to stage 4. And despite this seeming like it was his time, like we had 5 clears before him, he still can't do it. And again, it's an extremely emotional moment, one of the most emotional moments in all of Sasuke, but definitely a notable moment there. But even going beyond that, again, like stage 2 is fine. Again, they modified stage 2 for some reason. I really don't know why, considering I feel like Sasuke 23 stage 2 is one of my favorites. So they really swapped it out for a slower, not as interesting stage 2. But again, it was interesting to see the salmon ladder unstable bridge combo, though surprisingly no one actually has that much difficulty on it outside of Jun Sato, or like Kawaguchi only fails it because of the dismount. But again, we get some notable fails there. Again, Washimi, Sato, Ishikawa failing the metal spin. I thought that was interesting. And stage 1 is, again, like there are some great moments in stage 1, but it is a drag. It really just goes on and on and on with what is a relatively easy stage 1. I mean, this is a stage 1 that is pretty much exactly the same as Sasuke 23. It's just actually even easier in the sense that we get the X bridge instead of the current slider, which the current slider is probably a more difficult obstacle. But for some reason, we get more fails here. Again, only 12 people clear here instead of the 16, which I think really comes down to probably a not as strong field, where again, this is a tournament that does have a lot of comedians within it, which I think is also something to note. But again, we get some really great moments there. Again, we get Yamada threatening retirement once again and almost clearing the warp wall numerous times, but still ends up timing out there. Again, he had a pace that he could have cleared if he got through that on the first try, and he just still couldn't do it. We get, again, some weird editing in this tournament where like Wacky is number 21, yet for some reason he's not shown until after number 80. But he ends up having a pretty fun fail on the half pipe attack. We get Tarek failing the slider jump because he didn't let go of the pipe. And we get a great conclusion stage 1 where we get some of my all-time favorite runs from Shingo and Kano failing stage 1 the exact same way, with both of them taking a billion attempts to clear both the half pipe attack and the warp wall and timing out just as they get to the Tarzan jump. We get Nagano shocking jumping spider fail, or again, coming into this, it felt like Nagano was primed for Kanzen Seiha, yet he ends up rushing through spider walk and fails at the very end. That's a really notable moment. However, again, the pacing of it is just a bit off. I do feel like this would have been a tournament that would have been benefited if we fast forwarded some clears. Again, I did not need to see Lee Enchi, Arushihara, Kenji, and Okayama all clearing in a row. Again, that was just kind of boring. Even though, again, obviously Arushihara's run was someone that needed to be shown, but again, I just feel like there are so many moments where this tournament drags. But I haven't even talked about the final stage, where, again, this is another instance of good moments and bad. I mean, we get Yuji's first ever Kanzen Seiha, obviously incredible moment. However, we also get Kong timing out because his rope got tangled up. That's really underwhelming. And really, outside that, really weird pacing to this final tournament. Again, it's weird to have the final person not be the one that achieves Kanzen Seiha, and through that we get Yuji's Kanzen Seiha followed by Kenji and Okayama taking on the final stage immediately after that. That's kind of weird pacing, especially because Okayama doesn't even have that good of a performance, so that's the one that we end the tournament on. It's just really strange. I don't know, again, like, it just feels like the pacing of this tournament is just very bizarre, where yes, it has some all-time great moments, but it also has some weirdly placed moments, and because of that, for me, it's here at number 11. Now, number 10, we're moving on to a tournament that, again, another one that is largely controversial. However, I've always loved this tournament. Again, it's one of the tournaments I've watched the most, and I think in terms of storytelling, I think it's one of the best tournaments out there, and that is Sasuke 19, which I, again, just absolutely adore this tournament. I mean, it's a tournament where obviously almost the entirety of it is stage 1. Only 2 people clear stage 1, and both of them fail the salmon ladder at the very beginning of stage 2. Most of this tournament is stage 1, but that stage 1 is incredible. Again, it is one of the most ridiculously difficult stage 1s in the history of the show, especially for its respective time, as the most difficult version of almost every obstacle on the board. Now we do see the return of the Rokudan Tobi, which is like whatever, but we get the log grip, we get the pole maze, which was made more difficult, we get a way more difficult version of the jumping spider. I believe the most difficult version probably we've ever seen. I mean, maybe up for debate with 26, but again, the shortened runway and also the elevated height and distance of the obstacle is ridiculous. Follow that up with the first appearance of the half pipe attack, an obstacle that I've always personally really liked, though I do think this is probably the worst version of it, where it's more so about grabbing the rope than it is about the landing, where to me, the half pipe attack landing has always been the most interesting aspect of the obstacle. Yet here, the landing is pretty easy, but either way, we get the return of the warp wall, which is modified to be even taller, and through that added difficulty here. And we get the most difficult version of the flying chute. Again, one of my all-time favorite obstacles. This is the most ridiculous version of it that we only see 4 people, well, technically we don't even see one of them, but only 4 people even clear this obstacle, which is just insane. And again, I just love this course. And again, through that, we have great results here. I mean, we get one of my favorite joke runs from a guy who can't even get his pants off, and through that fails the steps, and that's funny. We get the first appearance of people being sent by G4, where Brett Sims and Colin Bell get sent here and both fail on the jumping spider. We have a notable performance from Morimoto, who clears this difficult jumping spider only to fail the half pipe attack. We get shocking fails from both of the Nagasaki brothers failing the flying chute, with Nagasaki in particular having never failed stage 1 at this point in his Sasuke career. We get Shingo and Yamada failing the jumping spider. We get Shiratori struggling on the warp wall to where he times out the flying chute. We get Takada timing out the top of the warp wall. Hiromichi Sato failing the log grip for some reason. But then we end stage 1 of obviously Nagano failing the flying chute. Again, this really shocking moment. First time he failed stage 1 since Sasuke 10? So again, really notable moment there. And again, we only have 2 clears, both of those clears being really great runs, especially the return of Koji Yamada, who really showed that he still had it. Again, barely getting through the flying chute, but ends up clearing there. And we also get Yuji Washimi clearing. Now again, it does lead to an underwhelming outcome to where they both just fail the salmon ladder, with Washimi actually failing and Koji just timing out there. But yeah, I just think the pure epicness of stage 1, really just the complete sense of dread as stage 1 continues, especially from Nagano, where we get his reactions to seeing all of these fails and him getting increasingly somber throughout it. It's just so notable to me, and because that for me, it's here number 10. Now number 9, we're moving on to the worst result from a tournament to one of the best, and here we're moving on to the oldest season left on the board. We have Sasuke 4. And obviously Sasuke 4 is a very important tournament. It's the first tournament with a Kanzen Seiha, is a tournament with the most stage 1 clears in the history of the show, and is a tournament that introduces the cliffhanger, obviously one of the most iconic obstacles in the history of the show. But also being the first tournament after Yamada was deemed the most likely to win, and through that becomes a major focus across this tournament. And this ends up being a really notable tournament. Though I will say, I do think the first half of it is not as great as the second half. I do think stage 1, despite us getting this ridiculous number of clears, actually does not actually lead to that interesting of results. Where, I mean, we do get a couple pretty close clears, but again, just seeing a whole bunch of people clear is not that interesting to me. I've always been of the mind of I would rather see a lot of shocking fails than a wide number of clears. But even here, we get some notable runs from the likes of Travis Allen Schrader, just completely dominating stage 1. And we get Shingo failing the balance bridge, which was weird, and Omori failing the rolling logs. And there were still some good moments in stage 1. Stage 2 was, again, mostly bland, again, more of the same. Though it is one that we really just rushed through. And to be fair, it's like we have 11 clears. It's like, yeah, I don't really care enough to see a lot of these. So, yeah, again, it's fine. But we get an all-time great stage 3. I actually think this stage 3 is probably one of my favorites in the history of the show, where again we get it modified to where we get the introduction of the cliffhanger and also the addition of a jump to the pipe slider, which ends up leading to some really great results here. And we get the likes of Asioka, Miura, and Naoki Kitani all getting to the end of the pipe slider and failing there. We get Travis Allen Schrader's DQ on the pipe slider, which is a really notable moment. We get Kane Kasugi's cliffhanger fail, but also most notably Yamada's cliffhanger fail, where this ends up being extremely dramatic in the most Yamada way possible, with him really hanging for forever before he eventually drops. But again, that's a really notable moment. Again, really the star of the tournament ends up being Akiyama, who has a really notable stage 3 run with him barely even clearing the pipe slider, having to climb his way up on the platform, and that's really notable. And again, obviously in Chiefs Kanzen Seiha. So again, it is a great tournament all around. Again, it definitely has its slow points in stage 1 and stage 2, but I do think as a whole, very strong tournament. It's here number 9. Now, number 8, we're moving on to a tournament that I think is pretty universally looked at as an all-time great one. And again, I do like it. However, I do feel like I don't like it as much as some other people, but still. At number 8, I do have Sasuke 12. And obviously the main thing from this tournament is Nagano. Nagano's timeout on the final stage is one of the most iconic moments in the history of the show. Again, he barely misses out on Kanzen Seiha here. And even excluding that, we get great results on this tournament. I mean, this is the last tournament where every member of the All-Stars ends up clearing stage 1. This ends up being the breakout tournament for Gunpei Shiratori, where he makes it to the final stage alongside Nagano. Also, we see this great run for Asioka, with him also making it there. We get Akiyama and Takeda making it to the pipe slider jump and failing there. We get the breakout performance of Koji Yamada, who clears at number 1 and makes it all the way to the cliffhangers. We also get Yamada's glove DQ, which is just really bizarre, especially having seen his future runs as well. But I got a really notable moment there, but I will say personally, I never liked stage 1 of this tournament. I always found stage 1 to be actually kind of boring, where we do get pretty underwhelming new obstacles in the weird hill climb as the first obstacle, and then we get the plank bridge, which are two just, again, kind of lame obstacles. And really, I just feel like not much of intrigue really happens in stage 1, where really the only notable fails there are Nakata failing the rolling log, and I guess Kinnikuin timing out, but outside that, not much happens in stage 1. I feel like that really drags this tournament for me. Along with the fact that also stage 2 is literally everyone clearing stage 2 outside of Yamada for his glove DQ. So again, that's also not great. But again, the ending to this tournament is fantastic, but again, I think the road there is not as great as certain other tournaments. So because for me, it's here number 8. Now number 7, we're moving on to a tournament that I'm surprised is this high, where this ends up being a relatively recent tournament. Again, a point where I never thought I liked modern Sasuke that much, but then again, at the time, I did remember really liking this tournament. But again, on the rewatch, I thought this was really great, and that is Sasuke 36. And this is one where it really felt like some of the more old school competitors, the competitors that I grew up watching, were finally doing well again. I mean, the likes of Matachi and Urushihara both make it to stage 3, both get to the vertical limit, and those were really notable runs. I mean, we get Ryo's save on the Ultra Crazy Cliffhanger. That's a really notable moment. And really, it's their 2 runs really make the tournament for me. But even beyond that, there's still great stuff in this tournament. Obviously, this continues off of Sasuke 35's redesigned course, and through that, we do get a lot of thrilling stage 1 runs. Though I will say probably my biggest criticism of it is the fact that we don't get that many shocking fails, where it feels like everyone that you would have expected to clear pretty much clears here. But it was great to see the likes of Tada and Araki make their breakout performances here. Also in stage 2, we get the shocking Drew Dreschel fail, his final appearance at Sasuke, where he ends up DQing from overshooting the landing on the conveyor, which is pretty mind-blowing. And we also get Kenji Darvish's stage 2 clear, which felt like a long time coming by this point. And again, stage 3 gets some great results. We see a number of people get to the vertical limit. We see Kawaguchi shockingly fail the first transition on the cliffhanger. We get Yusuke clearing once again, and this time barely missing out on the final stage, having this very Nagano Sasuke 12-esque moment of him timing out as he reached out for the buzzer. And again, that was a really notable fail for me. So again, overall, I just think this is a solid, well-paced, well-structured tournament from beginning to end. It had the return of some of my favorite competitors in Matachi and Yuji. It had this great outcome with Yusuke barely missing out on Kanzen Seiha, and it overall just had notable results. And because of that, for me, it is here at number 7. Now number 6, and for me, this is essentially the top tier of Sasuke tournaments. For me, when I think of the all-time great Sasuke tournaments, these are the ones that come to my mind. And to start all off, we're sticking with a pretty recent tournament, and that is Sasuke 31, which obviously ends up being Yusuke's first ever Kanzen Seiha. And this is a tournament that I've seen a lot of sentiment out there. This is an overrated tournament, which kind of surprised me because I always remembered really loving this at the time, being one of the few modern tournaments I remembered actually loving at the time that it aired. And going back to it, I still really like it. Now, obviously, I think there are criticisms here, particularly with the editing, where I do think there are certain fast forwards, certain people completely cut that is just a bit weird, but that doesn't take away from the fact that what we are shown is still very strong. I'm someone that really loved the introduction of the tackle warp wall combo, which led to a lot of shocking fails here. And the fact that we literally end stage 1 on Ryo, Yuji, and Nagano all failing the new warped wall was pretty mind-blowing to see at this point. But even beyond that, we get the reintroduction of the rolling hill, and through that we get one of my favorite sequences in any Sasuke tournament ever, where we get Shingo, he goes, fails the rolling hill, this shocking fail at the time, especially coming from 2 stage 2 appearances. We then get Takeda go and do the exact same thing and fail the rolling hill the exact same way, and this is followed up by Drew, who does the exact same thing too, but recovers despite almost failing. And again, this sequence here is just so hilarious to me. I always found this to be one of my favorite sequences any Sasuke tournament ever. But this also ends up being the first appearance of the ABCZ guy, who ends up timing out the Lumberjack. We get Darvish's first clear, where, I mean, like, to be fair, he does really take over the edit here, but again, still a really notable moment there. But I think really also one of the most notable moments of stage 1 is the first appearance of Ragivaru Anastase, who I remember watching this run the first time. This just completely blew my mind. The fact that he just came out of nowhere and just decimated stage 1 was really funny to see. And then he does the same thing in stage 2, where he literally breaks the salmon ladder as he's climbing up it. And again, that was just a super notable aspect of this tournament as well. Though realistically, as a whole, stage 2 is not great. I mean, we do see the first appearance of the salmon ladder, Nobori and Kadari, which I liked at the time. Obviously now it's kind of gotten a bit old. But for me, we get a pretty great stage 3 where, while most people end up failing the cliffhanger here, we do get a couple notable moments. One from the fact that Kano clears the cliffhanger after 3 straight failed attempts, and that's a really emotional moment there. But also we get this shocking Kawaguchi fail on the crazy cliffhanger, and that eventually leads to the Morimoto win, which is a great run, though I will say also a bit underwhelming from an editing perspective, and the fact that they spoiled that someone was going to win pre-tournament, and through that, when Morimoto is the only person to make final stage, it's like, well, I kind of know what's going to happen. And they really end up hamming up the final stage as well, like really focusing a lot on telling Morimoto's story, which again, like I could probably do without. So again, like, I mean, there definitely are flaws here and there, but I overall do still really love this tournament. I do think it has a lot of really notable moments. I do think it is an elite tournament of the show. It's here at number 6. Now number 5, we're moving on to a tournament that I will say, I remember at the time that this aired, this would have been in debate for my favorite tournament ever. I did really love this tournament when it originally aired. However, I do feel like as time goes on, my opinion of it does start to drop, and that is Sasuke 27. And Sasuke 27 for me is a tournament that has some of the best results in the history of the show. We get 27 stage 1 clears. We get a really great stage 2 with people failing really all over the board, and we get a notable stage 3, including the first ever clears on the ultimate cliffhanger, and eventually get Yuji's second Kanzen Seiha. Again, it's a great tournament on paper, but I think when you look on the ins and outs, it definitely feels a bit lacking in comparison to the top tier seasons. First, in the fact with stage 1, I mean, it is one that it does feel very nerfed, and really, I mean, that's the entirety of the tournament, where again, this was one where at the time they were thinking this might be the last Sasuke tournament, and through that we're very much pushing for a clear, and that's why we get this very nerfed stage 1 and stage 3, to where it just felt like they were banking on the fact that we were going to get a winner here. But still, I still like this stage 1, and to be fair, the stage 1 is what becomes the fundamentals of how A&W handled its stage 1 moving forward from this. But and we still have the rolling escargot here, which is an obstacle I still really like. The spin bridge is a good obstacle, just not good placement of it, but still we do get some shocking fails here and there. We do get Shingo and Kenji both failing the spin bridge, have Yamada getting to the wall once again in a position where he could clear and then times out once again. We see Lee En-chi failing the step slider, which was insane at the time. But really stage 1 is mostly about the clears here. I mean, we do get some very notable clears. I mean, we get 9 of the A&W 3 qualifiers end up clearing stage 1, with the only one not being shown in Drew Dreshel, who broke his knee, which again, definitely a reason why they didn't show that. But we get Ryo Mitachi's breakout season with him clearing. We get Asa's breakout season with him clearing. We get a lot of these figures that failed in stage 1 the previous tournament finally clearing stage 1 again, in Kano and Tajima and Yuji. I mean, we see Nagano clearing stage 1 finally once again. We have David Campbell breaking the time record for stage 1, which, I mean, to be fair, part of that is because the time limit was ridiculously high, but still. Stage 2 again is one of my all-time favorite stage 2s, where we have people failing all over the place. We have fails on the slider drop, where we see Tajima fail there. We see Flip Rodriguez fail there. We get Kano DQing after injuring his shoulder on the slider drop. We get double salmon ladder fails from Naoki Gatani and Asa, and this muscle musical member that ends up blocking his own jump with his feet, which is pretty notable. Then we get a lot of metal spin fails, which again, I've always loved the metal spin, and see all these metal spin fails from these pretty elite competitors was great to see. Again, a lot of these A&W people fail on metal spin, from Brent Stephenson, who cleared it in the previous tournament. We get Travis Forlonic, Travis Rosen. We see Morimoto fail the metal spin. Daisuke Murakami fails there. Wacky finally clears stage 1 just to fail the salmon ladder. We also get some notable clears here. I mean, 10 people clear here, with most notable of which being Ishikawa, who clears with pretty much 0 time on the clock. And we get stage 3, which again has great results, though again feels very neutered. And I do think stage 3 as a whole, like while again there are some entertaining moments here, we get Yuji and Ryo clearing. We have Hashimoto being the first to clear the ultimate cliffhanger and fails the chain seesaw. We get David Campbell's almost clear of the ultimate cliffhanger, only failed at the very end. We see Nagano failing the ultimate cliffhanger. Again, we see Ishikawa derailing on the flying bar by swinging too hard and falls backwards, and that's fun. Again, Okayama fails the flying bar. Again, there are a lot of notable runs here. The problem is that, again, stage 3 is just extremely nerfed. I mean, they literally brought back the arm bike as the first obstacle of the stage, and the jumping ring felt like a neutered version of what it could have been. The bungee rope climb was just really pathetic. The bar glider was extremely easy. Where really outside the flying bar, ultimate cliffhanger, and chain seesaw, this was just a very easy stage 3, and that definitely adds to an underwhelming aspect to the tournament. But still, considering how great the results are and the fact that we end with this Yuji second Kanzenseiha, what would have been the perfect ending for the series to declare its first ever 2-time winner, I do think that would have been a great way for Sasuke to go out, though I do think that obviously is lessened by the fact that it comes back, and through that it just really feels like a tournament made to have an eventual winner, which definitely harms it to a degree, and because that for me it's here at number 5. Now number 4, I can't believe we have a tournament this recent at number 4. At number 4, we have the most recent tournament of the show. We have Sasuke 40. And I will say, I was very worried that this was recency bias, where initially I placed it this high after my initial viewing of it. Again, it aired and I absolutely adored it. However, I did go back to rewatch it, and it's still great. I still adored the entire tournament. Now, again, there are definitely points where it is a bit slow. I do think the beginning of the tournament is a bit slow, and there's definitely a middle portion that can be a bit slow, stage 1. However, that doesn't mean that there aren't great moments in stage 1. I mean, I think stage 1 has these really notable fails, and we got Matsuda failing the fishbone. We have the return of Hashimoto only to fail the fishbone. We see Yamada failing the fishbone. We see these dragon glider fails with the bar derailing, including Snowman. We see Nagano timing out the warp wall, Akiyama failing the jump to the dragon glider, but again, it was still just great to see them back. And really, that is the thing with this anniversary tournament as a whole, is that it was just great as an anniversary tournament. We saw a lot of notable names that, again, I didn't think we were going to see back here. Again, all 4 champions competed on this tournament. We saw Koji Hashimoto return. We saw Kane Kasugi, and he actually cleared stage 1, which is insane to me still. And even beyond that, we got Shingo clearing stage 1 as well. And even outside that, we get a lot of notable clears here. I mean, we get Kajihara clearing with 38 seconds left on the clock. We get Ayano finally clearing stage 1, being only the second Japanese woman to do so. And we follow that up with Stephanie Edelman and Jessie Graff clearing, making it 3 women in stage 2. Again, we get great results here in 24 stage 1 clears, but we get Ryo failing the rolling hill, which was probably the most shocking run of the entire tournament. And we get 24 stage 1 clears here, and to see the quality of the people that made it through stage 1 was pretty insane. Now, again, I know there are criticisms over, okay, there's too many fast forwards in this tournament. However, I personally didn't have an issue with a lot of the fast forwards. Again, a couple of them I did, but not the majority of them. And stage 2 was solid. Again, not this elite stage 2, but we did see a record-breaking number of people clear here, but still have half the field fail here, including some notable fails from like Shunsuke failing the spider drop, Hioki failing the backstream, Kane and Shingo both failing around the time of the backstream, which, again, just great to see them even get that far. And then we get a great stage 3, where we see 3 clears here from 3 people I was expecting to clear, from Yoshiyuki Yamamoto, Tada, and Morimoto, but we also get, again, more shocking fails. Again, the likes of Kawaguchi failing the swing edge. We get Yuji failing the vertical limit, even though he cleared it the last time he got there. We get Kitaru failing the pipe slider, the first pipe slider fail, at least from the jump, since Sasuke 29, so over 10 tournaments there. Again, a lot of notable runs there, and then we get a great final stage. Again, the first appearance of the new final stage with speed climbing, and we have Morimoto almost Kanzenseiha despite that. So yeah, overall, I just really love Sasuke 40. Again, I've watched it twice Like, I really thought my opinions of it would drop on the rewatch, but they really just held. And because of that, for me, it's here at number 4. Now, number 3. And again, these are like the truly elite seasons of Sasuke. I mean, whenever I think of the best Sasuke tournaments, these 3 come to my mind. And to start off here, we're starting it off with probably one of my most rewatched Sasuke tournaments. And while I do probably have more issues with this tournament than really most of the other tournaments this high on the list, I still absolutely adore it. And that is Sasuke 8. And Sasuke 8 to me is probably the definitive Sasuke tournament in terms of storytelling, and the storytelling of this tournament, a tournament that was really hampered by the amount of rain. There was really added to the drama of everything that was happening within it. I mean, we get the first appearance of the Godon Tobi, which was made a lot more difficult due to the rain. And through that, we see half the field fail the first obstacle. We get Yamada threatening to retire if he doesn't clear stage 1, where after failing stage 1 for the first time in the previous tournament, he says that he's going to retire if he fails stage 1 again. And he does end up failing the warp wall, which ends up being this really emotional moment there, especially where we see him continue on and be able to clear the warp wall in his first attempt immediately afterwards. We get other notable fails from Shingo timing out at the top of the rope climb of him falling backwards. We get Akiyama failing the jump hang for his 3rd straight time. We get Shane Kasugi failing at the wall. Naoki Katani makes a return after missing a few tournaments only to fail the rolling log. We get Nagano's first televised appearance on the show with him failing the warp wall. Also, despite the terrible results here, we get some really solid clears, where Daisuke Nakata makes his first appearance, ends up clearing here. We get Jordan Yochev coming out of nowhere and probably having one of my favorite runs of all time, with him taking 3 attempts to get over the warp wall and clearing it with only 10 seconds left, yet despite that, still clearing the stage. We get Shoei also clearing with barely any time on the clock. We get Kane Kasugi clearing despite having just seen his brother fail. We get the return of Takada after failing stage 1 in Sasuke 7. Again, these are all pretty great moments. Now, I do think this is all harmed by the fact that stage 2 sucks, and this is one of the worst stage 2s in Sasuke history, with the rain stopping the conveyor and them increasing the time limit, making it ridiculously easy to where we still see Daisuke Nakata timeout, so whatever, but we still get 4 clears there, and through that we get a great stage 3, where outside of Shoei failing the body prop, everyone gets to the pipe slider, and here we see Takada's first pipe slider fail, but we also see Jordan Yochev again coming out of nowhere to make it to the final stage on his rookie appearance here, barely getting the pipe slider jump, and we get Kane Kasugi making it to the final stage, being this really iconic moment there, and the final stage itself is also iconic, again it pouring rain at this point, and we see Jordan Yochev timing out at the spider climb, only to fall out one of the most emotional runs in Sasuke history of Kane Kasugi timing out in the middle of the rain and him sobbing at the bottom. Again, like just overall fantastic tournament, despite there being that massive slow point in stage 2. Fantastic storytelling, really notable moments. It's still as high as it is here, number 3. Now number 2, we're moving on to a tournament where I did debate over these 2, which was actually shocking to me considering my number 1 tournament has been my number 1 tournament for a while. It's the tournament that I have a lot of nostalgia for, but I really debated with this one considering I do feel like my rewatch of this tournament was pretty strong, though I feel like the overall consistency of the tournament was not 100% there in my eyes, and that is Sasuke 17. Obviously, a very noted tournament as being one of the all-time greats, being Nagano's Kansenseiha tournament, and again, it is very, very good. However, I do think stages 1 and 2 are like just fine. Like while stage 3 and the final stage are all-time great Sasuke, I do feel like again stage 1, again we see the appearance of the circle slider. That's cool. I always like the circle slider. We do get some shocking fails from like Akiyama failing the circle slider. We got Yamada timing out the warp wall. We get some notable clears from Paul Anthony Tarrant coming out of nowhere to clear. We see Kota Homna finally clearing. We see Daisuke Nakata finally clearing. But really outside that, again, like not a super notable first stage. I do feel like the first stage is just kind of fine. And then stage 2, it's like we have a couple shocking fails with like Lian Chi failing Mel Spin, Koji failing Mel Spin, Kota Homna failing Spider Walk. But outside that, again, also kind of mundane affair. But by the time in stage 3, we are getting, again, elite Sasuke at this point. We're here where you get some notable runs here. Again, with Shiratori shockingly failing the body prop after having never had issues there before. We get Paul Anthony Tarrant getting all the way to the cliffhanger only to fail almost instantly there. We get another Takada pipe slider fail, but this one being extremely emotional. We get Nakata having to withdraw due to injury at the arm ring. But also beyond that, we get 2 clears. We get Nagasaki clearing. And this first stage 3 clear since Sasuke 13 at this point, which ends up being a great moment. Again, the first moment Sasuke ever watched. And also we get Nagano clearing, followed by, again, this really epic final stage. Nagano finally achieving Kanzen Seiha, which is this really emotional moment. I mean, again, I really love the original editing of this final moment, where I think something that's lost in the G4 version of it, that if you watch the original Japanese broadcast, like, they definitely put a lot of emotional weight into Nagano's Kanzen Seiha, and I do find this to be obviously debatably the best moment in Sasuke history, and I really debated at a point to put this at number 1, but it really was the fact that stages 1 and 2 are just kind of fine to me, that kind of left it a step behind it, but still good enough to be number 2. Now number 1, my favorite Sasuke tournament of all time does come from a tournament that I have a lot of personal attachment to. It is the first Sasuke tournament I ever watched live. It is probably also the peak of my love of Sasuke, and that is Sasuke 23, where, again, like, this is the tournament that just really had everything for me. It had great results, with this essentially being this like last hurrah for the All-Stars, being the last time we see 3 of them get to the 3rd stage. We also get great appearances from the Shinseidai, and this being a tournament where Kano gets to the final stage. And then beyond that, we get the first Stage 1 clears of Jun Sato and Koji Hashimoto and Tajima. We also see the likes of Kenji Takahashi finally get back to Stage 2. We see the culmination of A&W 1, which again was a big thing for my childhood. And we get to see Levi, Bryan, and Rich King all clear Stage 1. But even beyond that, we do get some notable fails as well. We get Yamada's, I believe, final time clearing the warp wall, only for him to fail the slider jump here. We had Jordan Yochev coming back for his final appearance, to where he times out on the rope ladder. We get the return of Omori, who ends up failing at the jumping spider. We get Hiromichi Sato again being the combo breaker, with him ruining this run of 92 through 100 that had all clears, where he fails the spider walk portion of the jumping spider. But also we have Nagano's slider jump malfunction, to where he had to run the stage again. That was a shocking moment. And that ends with 16 stage 1 clears. And this brings us to what is one of my favorite stage 2s in the history of Sasuke. One that, again, I can't believe that they modified the following tournament, but I always loved the introduction of the unstable bridge here, which, while not a super difficult obstacle, was definitely one that, again, took out people here. Brian Roscoe, Rich King both failed it, and then Yuji also had this shocking fail of him failing the dismount, but even then it was a time waster, and this was a very time-sensitive course, having a really quick time limit, and I felt like this was definitely a stage that I just enjoyed watching. While, to be honest, the time limit never greatly played a factor, it did seem to play into Yuji rushing at the very end. We also see like Lee En-chi fail the metal spin here. We get a lot of salmon ladder fails from the Sasuke Trials competitors that finally made it through. I mean, Hashimoto's is a big shocking one, with him failing the first rung of the salmon ladder. But again, this ends up being the final stage 3 appearance for Yamamoto, where he barely clears stage 2. We also have Takada and Nagano clear. So again, we get great results for stage 3. I mean, Kenji Takahashi does his Kong cross for the first time and gets all the way to the gliding ring, only to fail the dismount there. We have Okayama getting to the spider flip and failing there alongside Takada, with them being the only 2 people that actually failed the jump on the spider flip, which I always found to be fun ways to fail there. We get Levi shockingly failing the first transition on the cliffhanger. We can have Kano and Nagano clearing the final stage, being the final time that Nagano reaches the final stage, and comes so close to Kanzen Seiha, to where if it wasn't for the fact they lowered the time limit, he would have won. Which, to be fair, I am happy they lowered the time limit. I think the final stage was just too easy at 45 seconds, but still, I mean, like, this is just an all-around great tournament. I think every single stage delivers, and while I do think there are probably like a couple slower moments in the first stage, again, it has an all-time great stage 2, a stage 3 with a lot of really fun fails, and then again, like, Nagano's really close call at the very end. So I've always loved Sasuke 23, and considering it was also my first ever live experience watching Sasuke, it definitely holds a place in my heart, and because that is here number 1. There we go. That is my ranking of every Sasuke tournament. Now moving forward, obviously I'll be back for Sasuke 41 whenever that happens. I'll be doing a review of that. I also got this itch through doing this video of possibly wanting to do a Kunoichi one as well. I would love to rewatch Kunoichi and do a ranking of those, so maybe that. I also would like to do a video on Viking at some point. I think that could be fun, but don't know when that will come. But either way, those are videos I would like to do down the road. Don't know when they'll actually happen, but hopefully at some point. But for now, again, that's the video. Thank you for watching.